No,
stuff
can
you're
you,
talking
let's say,
about.
can you, because you're saying they're not far right, you work with them, I need to talk to him, but let's see if would you at least say that doing a Nazi salute, having Nazi symbols, and calling the former president of the United States the N-word is far right behavior, is Nazi behavior, and is unacceptable? Can you at least do
You're
that?
asking me to defend something that's not for me to defend.
No, I'm not
make an
asking you to defend, I'm
interview
asking you to condemn.
with- The way I put, if I was to map the Czech political spectrum, because again, you have to take into context national political spectrum is always going to be different from these like pan-European alignments. I think that ANO personally is a centrist force in Czech politics, a centrist patriotic force. And you have more extremes to maybe one side of it and another side of it, but we don't have a left-right division anymore of politics. I think we kind of moved, we've evolved past that in Czech politics.
What do you mean you've moved past left-wing politics? Because like there's still core definitions of what being right-wing is, and in those definitions, Babiš fits the criteria.
The only party right now that fits very neatly into the left-right divide are the Motorists, which, yes, are a right-wing party. They are our coalition partners, so that's definitely going to, as the coalition agreement has been drafted and the program has been completed, that also shifts the program to the right somewhat. That's definitely part of the arrangement. But at the same time, ANO, and we're speaking of ANO, we're speaking of the leader of ANO, Babiš, cannot, in my opinion, be classed, well, definitely not as far right. You can say that he is right-leaning, you can say he's left-leaning, but it's, again, he doesn't fit neatly into any binaries, because he's someone who looks at problems pragmatically and tries to solve them case-by-case basis, finding the right solution, not like a right-wing one or a left-wing one, not an ideological recipe.
What do you define right-wing as then?
Okay, I will give you first one that fits in Czech context, because you saw in the comments that vast majority of Czech commenters were criticizing your categories, and that's because in Czech Republic...
Actually, the number one comment from Czech people was, us young people wish he would go away, but we can't change this because of the old people in the countryside. I mean, that was overwhelmingly the number one comment that I had.
And that I would, of course, disagree with that, but... even the ones that don't vote ANO, don't support ANO, say, and they agree overwhelmingly, that for them right-wing means just like right-wing economic policy. It means free markets, lower taxes, etc. That's because we used to have left-right, sort of right-wing ODS, the government that now we, as ANO, ran against, and then you used to have the left-wing social democrats that have dissipated, and their voters have started preferring ANO instead. So that's from a Czech perspective how the left-right is perceived, and the only right-wing party in the parliament right now, in my opinion, that fits that description are the Motorists, who, yes, are in the coalition, and that skews the coalition to the right, but I would still disagree that it goes to the far right.
I think that the broad speaking way that most political scientists transnationally are defining far right is you have a combination of ultranationalism with an isolation of an other, of some type of, force or group that is seen as like a minority that is a problem, which almost always is like an exclusionary anti-migrant identity politics. And then you have consolidations of power in some regard. You have illiberal governing tactics. You are comfortable to form coalitions and majorities with these more extreme actors like you're talking about. But most of all, unlike centrist conventional conservatism, it rejects the pluralism of, culture, identity, political thought. You can argue that Babiš some years ago fit that centrist conservative idea, but now we see that he's formed the most far-right coalition in the history of the Czech Republic, number one, with a literal neo-Nazi who's being nominated for higher office here. But then also, he left Renew Europe on the European stage, and then he formed with Orban, Patriots of Europe, and that is the most far-right force in the European Parliament. I think, combined where Babiš has been and aligning with these right-wing forces and how he's governing and forming a coalition here with the, he adheres to the Great Replacement theory.
We rebuke what you said, because you just given three definitions that you define far-right as. So you've given the mainstream political scientist view that I would agree with. And that actually proves that we don't fall into that category in ANO. You said ultranationalists. Ultranationalists are not pro-EU and are not pro-NATO, period. They are pro-EU at least pure EU membership, but we are Eurosceptic when
There
it
we
comes
go. Yeah. Pro EU membership.
when it comes to the solutions that the EU poses, and we want to change those. Very firmly pro NATO, so ultranationalist of the table.
Let's stick on that point real quick. What do you mean by pro EU, pro NATO? Because you can say, yes, we want to be a member of the EU and NATO, same as Orban. But in practice, what are the policies and working within the EU and NATO that actually is pro EU and NATO?
Let me first rebuke the definition, because you said
All right, we'll circle back.
So ultranationalist doesn't apply to ANO, doesn't. Finding like some minority as the enemy. We have most of our, like basically 95% of Roma vote ANO. Huge portions of Vietnamese, they vote ANO. And we don't have like a group of people that we identify within our borders as the enemy. We don't
Within
even
our borders.
Ukrainians. We don't do it. We don't do it. And there's other parties that do it, sure, but they bombed because we took their voters instead, because Czech voters don't really find that rhetoric appealing. And the third point, rejects pluralist thought, also not true. We ran a legitimate campaign against other parties. If we lost, we'd concede the election. Babiš did this in year 21, lost to the coalition of 5 parties, spent 4 years in opposition, and pretty much follows the rules. On the contrary, I would say ANO, if you know the organization, if you know the people there, it is a very pluralist party. There's a huge diversity of thought, a huge diversity of opinion, because it tries to collect experts from all kinds of field of life into one party and trying to find solutions to problems that are not ideological but are more practical.
So let me quote Babiš. He said, quote, "I have stopped believing in successful integration and multiculturalism. We must do our utmost to reject migrants." So like you said, it's not within borders. You can say it's not the Roma community, it's not the Vietnamese, it's not Ukrainians, whatever, but he's campaigning on a directly ultra-nationalist, xenophobic right-wing idea, which is we must reject migrants. And he continued on that to say that we cannot kill our continent in the name of humanity. In 2030, there will be more Muslims in Brussels than Europeans. And has talked about how you don't want to have a Muslim people come in because it'll strip the identity, purposefully replace the Czech culture and way of being. And that, quote, "We don't want to live in our home like people in Africa or the Middle East." So where is this not a right-wing, Islamophobic,
These
xenophobic
are all
idea?
accurate statements, and being against multiculturalism doesn't make you automatically far right. That used to be...
it is a core definition of being far right is to be against multiculturalism, though.
No, like, does everyone who rejects multiculturalism, does that make them far right?
That alone, it would be an act of being far right. But it's when you take it in combination with everything else. But it is an act of being far right to be.
Right.
I mean, how is it not?
Act of being far right. So every time I have an opinion that is associated with something, or you associate with something, it is an act of me being, for example, left wing. When I say
by definition of being far right, exclusionary identity politics, framing immigration as a civilizational threat. That is by definition a right wing. So yes, if you do that. If you encompass part of that, that is an act of being far right.
Well, in that case, we have acts of being left wing, acts of being
you can, and that's exactly
being centrist. But you say
yes,
we're far right because of one thing we said. We are far right, but because of things we say that are like left wing, we are not left wing. We ignore.
Let's go back to that then, because exactly on that one thing, it's an act of being far right. So let's combine it with the supposed pro EU, pro NATO. You can be pro-membership of EU and NATO, because of course you will be. What would the Czech Republic be without being a member of the EU or NATO? But we see that he wants to take away the munitions program for Ukraine. That was a core staple of how the Czech Republic was able to be an actual beneficial member for NATO. So, I mean, he's saying, we're not going to do the things we actually have been doing to be a vital member. We're going to keep all the rewards of being a member. And also, we're going to be highly critical and skeptical of policies coming from Brussels, like green regulation, digital regulation, migration, refugee plan, et cetera, et cetera. So where is it that he's a pro-EU, pro-NATO? Is he not just pro-EU, pro-NATO membership?
Pro-EU membership, pro the idea of EU being this association of states that has free trade, that harmonizes regulation, that creates a good environment for member states to trade and travel. But when EU makes bad decisions that harm Europe, that harms Europe's interest, like, for example, now ETS, the environmental trading system, that is going to be a catastrophe for the living standards of regular Europeans, we say no. We put our foot down because we want to save European Union from itself. That is something that's way more pro-European than those that purportedly say that we're Euro-federalists, but then we make every single decision to destroy EU. Same with uncontrolled, unregulated migration. This is not an ideological issue. It's just come in legally, be processed. It's not a...
You're saying it's not beneficial for Europeans. I mean, what's the core of what you're saying here? Because it sounds like you're saying it's not that. I mean, most of, the European Union sees these things as beneficial, sees these things as being the way it should go. It is something in the European Parliament that's reflected by the democratically elected members of the European Parliament from across Europe. But it sounds like you're saying it doesn't serve Czech interest.
No, it
And
doesn't
that could be the
serve
case,
European
which would be the nationalist Czech first, which is also what he ran on, which is Czechia first, echoing America first, echoing MAGA with red hats.
It
You see where
doesn't
I'm going?
serve European interest. That's another thing. It's a European problem, and with illegal immigration, for example, like if these people get into Schengen, right, unprocessed, we can't catch them anymore because Schengen has open borders, right? And that's already a problem. So we just have to, as an EU, stand like firmly against illegal migration. You want to come in, you have to go through the process. That's very simple. I don't find this controversial. That used to be the mainstream political opinion. Now it's considered far right.
It's not. So this is the thing. It's not that you being pro legal migration is pro right, but it's that framing it as great replacement theory, framing it as an existential threat, and saying you don't believe in successful integration and multiculturalism. That together is a very different thing than saying, hey, you can come to the Czech Republic, but do so legally, and we'll accept you. This is saying we don't believe you should be here in the first place. We don't believe you can coexist amongst us, and we believe you're here to replace us.
The demographic crisis is, again, it's an objective documented phenomenon.
Demographic crisis. Expand on that more. What do you mean demographic crisis? That sounds...
What Babiš is touching on, right? What he mentions repeatedly is that we have a birth rate crisis in Europe, that we are not able to staff our own population, that we're not able long-term to support older populations because we're not going to have enough people to fund pensions. So what we're saying is we want to create a country where everyone's prosperous, where everyone feels comfortable having a family, and that is sufficient with its own people. And that's it. And, we like being this way. We like the character. And
White
that's not
Czech people is what you're saying.
Well, again, you're telling us that we have to take in immigrants instead of supporting families in our own country. And you're telling us
I don't believe that. I don't believe the Czech Republic should have to do that at all. I'm just saying you shouldn't say that you shouldn't say you should do the utmost to reject migrants and against successful integration multiculturalism. And I think it's funny too that you just said that Honor doesn't have a problem with the Vietnamese, with Ukrainians, with the Roma, whatever. But then you're saying the migrants you're talking about are basically black and brown Muslim migrants. Those you're saying that will be a threat to the well-being.
If Babiš is saying that, I didn't hear myself saying that. So I don't know where
Babiš has definitely said it. He said illegal migration from Muslim countries of Northern Africa and the Middle East pose a danger to European civilization based on Christian foundations.
There's another aspect. There's a civilizational, of course, aspect to a difference in values. Because again, you're framing us as being radical, far right, or like reactionary or whatever. Have you seen people in the cultures that we were talking about? Have you seen the value systems in Muslim countries, right?
What are you saying at the moment? This sounds to me like you're saying because you believe that they're an inferior society, that therefore it's not far right to believe that.
Than anything you've seen in Europe. And you want more of that in Europe? You want more, like, you want...
Tell me about these conservative societies. Are you talking about the UAE? Are you talking about Saudi Arabia? Are you talking about Lebanon? Are you talking about Jordan? I mean, we're talking about a massive region of countries and histories here. I don't think you can fairly put and say they're more conservative. They would be unbeneficial. They don't share values with Europeans. I think they're
way more conservative. That's true. I'm not saying that they're not going to be beneficial in some ways, but what Babiš says, if this quote you're saying is true, but I would agree with it either way, that like you have people with different value systems that are way more conservative than ours, way more conservative than anyone from the Patriots group is saying, right?
So you believe that these Middle Eastern people are trying to move the Czech Republic to make the Czech Republic more conservative and be a civilizational replacement for the Czech Republic? No, but let's keep it on the Czech Republic right now. I mean, because that's what the core of what he's talking about. I mean, that's a little insane, right? I don't think there's any Muslim people that are plotting in their homes of we need to go take the Czech Republic. Like,
but that's not what he's saying. Read the quote again. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying there's a plot. He's saying that's a demographic movement. That is the trend. And it is true because when you see, and Babiš is very a Francophile, he speaks French and knows all these people in France. So he's seen what's happening in France. He's seen how these communities operate in France, that you have these separated...
What is happening in France?
Parallel communities that have their own way more fundamentalist values than pretty much any Christian you're going to meet has. It is different. It is different.
I mean,
that's what he's commenting on.
This sounds like such a strong talking point until you reckon with it. Like, I, for example, live in the Middle Eastern neighborhood in Brussels, and it could not be further from the truth. Like,
I lived in a Middle Eastern neighborhood in The Hague. I know these people, like, they're normal, but I'm telling you...
Do you know these people, or did you hear what Babiš was saying about these people, and then you were like, I'm not going to talk to these people? Like, I don't believe you were friends with these people when you're saying you view them as a great civilizational threat.
I was. But... And the thing is, it's funny because I got along with them so well, because a lot of the times we would both reject all the woke stuff. We would be like, oh, this is too woke for us. But then, for them, it would be like, well, that's because my faith. And in our faith, we don't even, allow allow women to have opinion. I was like, okay, that's a bit too far for me. Okay. But like, that's kind of the funny part, that like you are advocating for multiculturalism, advocating for this immigration from people that are going to be way more conservative than you encountered
from people
from
that
any
like,
white person
I hear you when you're saying that there's extremist conservatives. They're everywhere. Every society, every culture has them. Obviously there's fundamentalist Christians, there's fundamentalist Muslims, like there are fundamentalists all over the place. That is a reality. Does that mean that the entire Middle East can be written off that way? Of course not, because A, it's not reflective of the countries and the plurality that you have there at its core. But B, it doesn't make any sense when you're reckoning with other major liberal metropolitan cities across the world, like London or New York or Chicago or DC, Ottawa, Toronto, Paris. You can say too. I know you have your issues talking about Paris, but like literally, if you're gonna have these demographic shifts you're talking about, these migrants that are coming over, you think they're coming over? They're the most fundamentalist of that region. They're choosing to come into basically a different culture is talking about that is not super welcoming to them. That is, as you're saying, more liberal. You think maybe these aren't folks that are making the choice that they think they can actually assimilate and live a good life there. Like, I think it's an odd thing to think that they're coming over to establish what you're basically saying of like this strict fundamentalist caliphate where women don't have any rights in downtown Paris and Prague.
I'm talking from my experience. There was a sort of social compromise that, for example, functioned for a while in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands works in a pillarized society model where every religion sort of keeps to itself, has their own schools, has their own media, and etc. When Muslim societies came, the Dutch decided to not assimilate them, but embrace and continue this pillarized model. They gave them funding for their schools, for their mosques, for everything. This sort of created this sort of social compromise that worked until there was pressures. And then what happened in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is still reeling from this, still remembers this very well. This is why Wilders won the one before the previous election. And that was, you had Pim Fortuyn, you had the assassination of Van Gogh. You had all these events that have shaken Dutch society and showed, well, no, we've actually allowed radical cells to fester. We funded it, and now there's a significant portion of our population that might be hostile to us. So they rolled it back. They said this was a mistake. This multicultural policy was a mistake. They went harder, and now they reestablished some sort of social cohesion, right? But we don't know how it's going to develop long term. We're not going to know how it's going to develop long term because we don't know how much more of a percentage of their population is going to grow a fundamentalist and Islamist. We don't know, because that's a Pandora's box they opened.
What you basically are saying is that the Netherlands had a segregated integration system where they let people come in, they funded them, they stayed to themselves, and then wondered why when they reintegrated them later, they were mad?
No.
I mean,
what
like,
happened
come on,
was that they pillarized. There's a pillarized system. They
Mhm.
gave them all their rights. They gave them all, they accommodated
but
their
just
culture.
be separate.
They
Don't interact with
accommodated
any
their
of the other
culture,
white
but
Dutch folks.
these people, this community didn't accommodate the Dutch culture back, because, for example, part of Dutch very liberal culture is freedom of speech. So when somebody came in and was critical of Islam, was critical of some of its fundamentals, they got murdered. That's a fact.
No, dude, I'm not denying that there are crimes and there are hate crimes that go back and forth constantly. I think part of the problem why that is the case, though, is because you have host countries that are unwelcoming to the people they are welcoming by policy. And then you wonder why the unintegrated immigrant population is angry or frustrated. I mean, you're talking about Merkel, basically.
No,
This was
that's
entirely what happened with the Syrian refugee crisis after 2016. There was a policy of let people in, but don't do anything to integrate them, and then wonder why there is more pedograft, which also we know statistically, actually, there wasn't. I mean, by proportion of society, they actually did not commit more crimes than anybody else.
Don't you think
But like it festered within, of course, your circle you're talking about.
how many people from the Middle East desire and want to go into countries that purportedly hate them and mistreat them? That's so bizarre. I really don't
Why do you think people from the Middle East try to move into Europe? Let's, for example, what about the Syrian refugee crisis? Why did that happen?
Well, because the neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia, who have the money to accommodate them and were culturally closer to them, didn't want them. They rejected them. So
No, why did they have to leave Syria? Do you think they wanted to leave Syria?
No, of course not. There was
exactly.
Stupid foreign intervention in Syria. That's what happened. The war that took place there happened. These people had choice to go to a closer country that was culturally closer to them and could take them in, had the space, had the money to take them in. They rejected them. Why did they reject them? Why was it our role? Why was it our duty to take these people if their own kin didn't take them?
Own kin.
Why?
So who are the own kin you're referring to right now specifically?
Saudis, Qataris, whoever.
Yeah. So we should base our values on how we integrate foreigners based on those that have active slave labor conditions for the majority of the migrant population. You're saying that should be the standard of how we base.
Well,
if you're going to talk about the Qataris and how they integrate people.
You want more of that culture in Europe. So I don't know. You tell me.
Okay, you're going to compare a Qatari monarchy, a monarchy that has active slave labor, to justify a description for an entire people and religion it's a makeup of many religions of people. I mean, come on. Okay, so let's pivot real quick. This is what you're basically saying is what all of the right wing does, which is the issue is migrants. It's not maybe that you have a billionaire who has agrofert, who actually maybe is consolidating a lot of resources for himself and controls a lot of the media influence himself, and has actually had numerous fraud and judicial charges as a result of this. A lot of scandals that Babiš has had. Maybe that's the issue of why things aren't going as well as people would want. Maybe it's not the migrants far away in Qatar or Saudi Arabia, but it's the billionaire who is teaming up with Trump and CPAC and the Heritage Foundation to make things a little bit more challenging for Czech folks.
Again, first of all, like, to the scandals, there's not much I can tell you when there was no conviction ever. Like, I don't know what it's
some's
ongoing for like 10 years or I don't know how long. Nobody even knows what's going on there anymore. So I don't know. I feel like it's a question of somebody who has a lot of money went into politics because they wanted to do something other than earn money with their life. They got punished for it because politics doesn't really merit or reward successful people going in there, because there's a lot of losers and a lot of people who just don't work in politics at all. But that's part of the political battle. That's part of the pluralism we were talking about. Babiš fights for himself, but he doesn't censor people. He didn't go and institutionally break rules. When law mandated, he put Agrofert away from his ownership. He did it. When law mandated, he sold his media. He did it. But the thing is, he always has cooperation, but there's no law telling him that he can't have cooperation with Agrofert, because there's no law telling people that you cannot do business and do politics. Because then you would be punishing people that actually had some success with business to do actual politics.
Of course, the laws may be a little bit outdated here. I think if you can't see the problem that you have a billionaire who has a monopoly in an entire sector and has, largely controlled a lot of the media, if you can't see that that's a problem,
all I want is for my politicians to follow the law, right? But I also don't want the law to exclude people who have been successful in some sort of business from being active in politics. I don't want anyone really to be excluded from politics, any citizen. So that's it. I don't about that. I'm like, okay, somebody built a successful business. They're successful in politics. That's fine by me.
Sure. Don't use the business to benefit your politics then, number one. And B, don't use your politics to benefit your business. That's kind of has to be the core, right?
His net worth, you can see that not much of that has happened because, politics really wasn't too beneficial for him in the end.
Okay. Industry-wise, he still holds the kind of primary monopoly on that sector, so I don't think that that's really true. But let's get into the fact that the Heritage Foundation, which I'm sure you're familiar, but that is the most far-right political think tank in the United States, which is launching Make Europe Great Again across Europe right now, partnering with folks like Orban, AfD, all the right-wing folks you can think of. They described Babish's victory as a conservative comeback. This is the age of patriots has begun. This victory matters for America and the heart of Europe. So if Babiš isn't far right and Honor doesn't represent the far right, and yet they're now members within the far right coalition of the European Parliament, he's making appearances at CPAC, which is the far right forum, and he's being told by the Heritage Foundation that his victory is a victory for the far right. How is it not far right?
Again, the Heritage Foundations, I don't follow them, or we don't have any ties to them. I don't know. Like, you ask them. Like, I feel like most
the ties are CPAC. I mean, Babiš went and spoke at CPAC, and he sat down with these folks.
But I know I was at CPAC myself, by the way. But Heritage Foundation, I heard about them. I don't know about them, so I'm hard for me to comment. You know, you're telling me they're far right. I don't know. You call everything far right, so I'm not inclined to trust that description.
Well,
so whatever.
They're the ones who created Prada 2025 and believe in the military executive.
My thing is that Babiš went to CPAC. There was a bunch of there's a huge variety of personalities that went to CPAC, from the center right to pretty much as right as you can go in, for example.
What center-right people appeared at CPAC this year? I don't recall any center-right people appearing at CPAC.
Abbott, the Australian ex-prime minister, Ben Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro's center-right?
Yeah, definitely. But yeah,
even though he overtly calls himself a Jewish fundamentalist who's supporting
again,
Trump. I mean,
everything. We obviously have a different understanding of what far right is, you know, because again, like
that's the issue. There's no different understanding. There's a definition for far right that Babiš adheres to, and you're denying the definition because you're saying that it doesn't fit what you would like it to be.
No,
which is basically a capture-all. That he can be far right, but he can be centrist, but he can be liberal.
And I debunked it. And I debunked it already. You gave me 3 points how you define far right.
You defended your belief in great replacement theory, but you said that is something Babiš basically believes in. You defended that it's okay to believe in it, but it is inherently a part of the far right. And what I'll add also is, if he's not far right, why did he say, quote, I'm going to channel Trump and MAGA in the Czech Republic?
Again,
and then
first
he did.
Of all, you define that as far right, contentious, but sure. What Babiš said is that when it comes to foreign policy, meaning trying to negotiate a meaningful end to the war in Ukraine, he is full Trumpist team on that. If the peace gets negotiated,
this was in
Babiš
domestic
went
context.
and critiqued Trump later, which I don't think you'd done your research there, on saying he didn't actually deliver the peace in time. So Babiš isn't like saying whatever Trump does, we're automatically on board. He's just
going to take his slogan and his hats and support his campaign, but he's not actually going to. That's as far as it goes, right? You're just saying it's foreign policy.
When it comes to Ukraine, we want to deepen cooperation with America, of course, because it is our key ally in NATO, right? Because we are pro-NATO, we want to cooperate with America on these specific policies. That's true.
And we can talk about the foreign affairs too. And again, you didn't address that he'll withdraw the munitions program for Ukraine, but we're talking about him directly saying he's going to channel Trump's approach, and then he did, and he wore. I mean, why would he wear red hats and have people wear red hats and say Czechia first and Czechs first?
Yeah, okay, whatever. Why not? No. I mean, red hats are a cool design. I like it. Whatever.
But weird thing to choose this hill to die on. I mean, you can, because you already said you believe in the ideas of the far right. You already defended that you believe that there's societies that are not great and
you call it far right. Replacement. I call it common sense. That's because you call everything far right, even though you gave me a definition.
I don't call everything far right. I'm calling AfD, Orban, Trump, and Babiš far right.
You gave me 3 points how you define far right. I debunked every single point you made.
What did you debunk about the exclusionary identity politics by saying, yes,
ultranationalist?
You said that you guys have Roma support, whatever, but in practice, the policies he's saying.
We actually have pluralism of thought. We have people from all walks of life creating point-by-point sort of solutions to problems, not ideological solutions, not left or right, but stuff that works. As I say, I think we're centrist force in politics. Somebody would disagree. Somebody would say, no, we're more on the right. Somebody would say, no, we're more on the left. You had people in the comments that call us left-wing, you know? So obviously we don't fit into the easy binary, but we're not supposed to do that. That's not our goal. We want to.
In Central Europe, there's obviously a mix of, political theories within certain groups by nature of the history. There's going to be no one in the Czech Republic in a post-communist society that's going to say that we can't have any social welfare state, of course. But by your logic, what you just said, by keeping any of those things, you're saying that then Orban wouldn't be far right, because Orban has also kept many of these things because it's what the people in Hungary want. But Orban, objectively, by every description, is a far right politician who is illiberal, who is embracing authoritarian tactics to hold power in his country. So
he is
Orban,
in my mind, he's solidly right wing, but far right is, for example, Mihazank, the guys, the actual ultranationalists, the guys who would actually catch your definition of ultranationalist, finding enemy and rejecting pluralism. Those are far right. They're in Hungary. It's a smaller party, but they're in the parliament. They're right of Orban. They're far right. Orban.
So the only way you can be far right is if you're a literal Nazi, is what you're saying. That's how far it has to be. Anything between that is the center. Anything between that is the center.
Again, he's throwing these terms. You're trying to make everyone fit into your labels, into your simple binary.
Look, let's just close on this here. Babiš is an individual who works with Orban and the far right force. He founded it in the European Parliament. Babiš is an individual that embraced Trump directly and the MAGA agenda. Babiš is an individual that you said has great replacement that he believes. And now Babiš is an individual who has, started the process of creating the most far-right coalition in the history of the Czech Republic with the nomination, which you still haven't addressed, of a neo-Nazi who called Obama the N-word and who did a Nazi salute and wore a Nazi salute.
I'm not going to speak on this guy's behalf.
No, but why would a centrist nominate a neo-Nazi?
But he's not a neo-Nazi. What are you talking about? Like, that's so ridiculous. Like, if you want to ask him, confront him with it, he will deny it. He'll tell you.
Quick, so what is he if he's not a neo-Nazi? He called the former president of the United States the N-word and did a Nazi salute.
Again, I don't know if he did, because you have these.
It's on camera. It's literally recorded on camera that he did a Nazi salute at a rally, and also tweeted himself that Obama was an N-word who is best selling hashish at the train station.
Go ask this guy himself.
No, I'm here debating you. You said you're here to debate
from
this.
A different party. Not,
but your party who you're defending is choosing to work with a far right extreme that is, of course, further even right than the far right. If Nazis are the boundary in which you become far right, that's a crazy definition. The far right is a large spectrum that includes Nazis and then extends to illiberal forces that are ultranationalist, Eurosceptic.
I know them personally. They're not Nazis. I talk with the motorists. We know them. We have good relations with them. They're not Nazis. They're right wing. They're basically like.
So you defend
liberal on economics, and they're very right wing on social issues.
You think it's okay to embrace Nazi symbols, to do a Nazi salute,
oh my goodness,
and to call the former president of the United States the N-word?
You go ask him to explain it. I don't know. Like, I don't know about this.
No. Can you? Let's say, can you? Because you're saying they're not far right. You work with them. I need to talk to him. But let's see if would you at least say that doing a Nazi salute, having Nazi symbols, and calling the former president of the United States the N-word is far right behavior, is Nazi behavior, and is unacceptable? Can you at least do
You're
that?
asking me to defend something that's not for me to defend. Go.
No, I'm not asking you to defend. I'm asking you to condemn.
Who's from the motorists? Go ask them if it's even true. All this stuff you're labeling, these are accusations.
It's on video. The truth and the facts are real.
They reject them. So go ask them. Go ask them to defend this, because they will tell you it's false.
So you can't defend it. So what do we call
Because I don't know if it's real, man. Like, that's what I'm talking to you about. So I'm defending.
You do know if it's real or not. You, like you said yourself, you're working in the politics system yourself. You're working for honor. This is your job to understand. You're an assistant in the parliament.
You're talking about someone else now. So can we please stick to the topic?
It sounds like you want to stick to the topic because you're not able to condemn Nazi behavior, which I think would mean that inherently you and your party are probably far right.
Accusations at somebody else.
What I'll do here after this is when this posts, I'll make sure the clip right here that I'm pointing, this will be the video of him doing the Nazi salute, and this will be his tweet where he called Obama the N-word, and this will be a photo of him wearing Nazi symbols. Okay?
Then
everyone will see it, and they know that it'll all be there, and you can look at it after, and you will know that you couldn't condemn and say this is far right behavior.
And I'm going to reference you to him. So you ask him.
Please
about it.
Connect me with him, and I would love to tell this Nazi he's a Nazi. I mean, dude, come on, this is unreal.
That's an amazing idea. That's an amazing idea. You guys.
So what I've gathered from this conversation is that you believe
for my own team, which is my team, which is centrist.
Your team is now his team. You guys are forming coalition. That's your team now. That's what happens when you form a coalition. You govern together. That's your team.
On the basis of, go read. Have you read our party manifesto or our government manifesto? Have you read it?
Parts of it, yes.
All right. It's not a far-right manifesto. You could say it's a right-wing manifesto by some definition, sure. But again, all you're doing is you're not adding anything to the conversation. You're labeling everyone far right, Nazi, and you're not really like giving anyone anything to work with. You're not finding a common ground. You're just trying to
There's no
divide
common
people.
ground, and that's why the centrists in the Czech Republic refuse to form a coalition with your party, and why your party is forming a coalition with the far right. Because the common ground is you either stop being far right and stop entertaining great replacement theories, Eurosceptic theories, these people that are actively engaging in Nazi behavior. And so the issue here is that he could be a centrist. He at one point was a centrist. He used to be in Renew Europe. He used to work with centrist forces, but he abandoned the center to go with the far right.
No.
And now the center won't work with him because there's no common ground with the far right.
The Renew Europe abandoned the center. You got it reversed. Things that were normal, that were completely conventional, that were completely
You're telling me that
mainstream.
Renew Europe in 2021 believed in great replacement theory, and then all of a sudden they decided to stop doing so, and now you guys have to go to
Renew
Patriots of
Europe
Europe?
has
I mean, that's...
adopted a radical agenda, Green Deal, Migration Pact, revoking national vetoes.
The Green Deal that they just dismantled in the European Parliament a week ago.
We said we're going to campaign against this because people don't want it. We have the democratic mandate because we know that these are bad ideas. And we went to Renew, and we told them this is the program we're going to be pushing. And the Renew was like, no, this is not the program we're going to be pushing, but we can bribe you with whatever parliamentary posts. Our guys in European Parliament decided they're going to follow their electoral program rather than get some cushy job or whatever, you know?
All right. I think we got to call it here, but I think it is kind of funny that you're saying that this Green Deal that's so in opposition. Of course, Mr. Agrofert doesn't believe in the Green Deal. I mean, come on, man. Talk about conflict of interest here. This is absurd. But anyways, Hugo, it's been good to talk with you. Thanks for having this conversation.
All right. Cheers.